Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. Hope everyone is enjoying the little bit of fall weather that we're getting. I'm enjoying it. My pups are enjoying it. We are hopefully y'all are enjoying it as well. So we're going to go ahead and go through some of our certification processing updates, and then we'll have some reminders, call summary, and then of course our appendix. Some of this information that we are providing today is a repeat, but since it's such important information and so new, we figured that we would provide some repeated information for you. The deck has been dropped into the chat if you'd like to see it. It will also be posted to the HR and the prep provider section of teachlouisiana.net. And then of course it will also be shared on our Louisiana Believes website, where the monthly calls are stored for each office. So first, what we're going to talk about today is the new applications. Again, we had to revise more than 30 applications in response to the newly adopted policy. So there were quite a few changes that were made. All of them were updated either on or before October 1st. Go ahead and start using those applications now. Of course, we'll have that 1 month overlap between October 1st and November 1st, where either version of the application can be submitted. However, beginning November 1st of 2023, it will be required to be on this October 1st version for processing. Also, on that November 1st date, applications will no longer be placed on hold if they are waiting for evidence of payment or if they don't have the accurate payment amount. Any application that does not include that evidence of payment or accurate payment will be closed out unprocessed, meaning that you'll have to start over. Now, if it's closed out unprocessed for insufficient payment, of course, that payment has not been used and it can be submitted with that new application. Also, beginning on November 1st, we will no longer accept the corrected application pages to modify an incorrect request as a feedback follow-up. What does this mean? For example, if a hire or renewal cannot be issued, we had previously allowed a correction to request either renewal or non-practicing if you just update the application page of that document and resubmit. Now we will be providing guidance, and a new application and new fee will be required if the original request cannot be granted. Of course, best practice is to check the certificate, check Compass, and then select both hire and renewal if you're not sure if an educator qualifies for a hire certificate. Now, for anyone that has a break in service or a break in their evaluation, we do recommend that you use the ask a question feature or maybe even schedule office hours before you submit that application if you're not sure what requests should be made due to a complex certification history. As a part of the adopted policy that recently went into place, our office is now going to be allowed to use evaluations appropriate to the type of setting in which the teacher served. So essentially, it will allow us to mix evaluation types. This change will, of course, allow ancillary teaching and EDL certificates to be renewed, even if they're serving in the non-public setting. There are quite a few complications, I guess, due to this exciting policy. So we want to talk through some of those and just make sure that everyone understands what needs to happen. If an educator served in a public school, we will be looking for Compass evaluations. Keep in mind that no scores reflected in Compass need to be submitted to us in any other way except for through the Compass Information System, or CIS. We've seen some people putting those in the local personnel evaluation attestation. We don't need those if they're entered into Compass. If an educator served in a non-public school, we're looking for local personnel evaluations. Those local evaluations cannot be used for an educator serving in a public school to replace anything that's missing or incomplete. It's only going to be used for teachers in the non-public setting. Now, the local personnel evaluations can be used for educational leader certificates, at the district level only. The last type of evaluation that we can use in this mixing evaluation piece is an employer evaluation. That is different from local evaluation. An employer evaluation can be used if the educator is contracted to a public school that's authorized by BESE. Any out-of-state experience, of course, regardless of this type of service, whether it's public, non-public, or contracted, still has to be on the out-of-state experience verification attestation form. As you can see, because service history will need to clearly be identified for us to determine which form we're looking for, how the educator or where we should be going for the evaluation, the experience verification form is now a required document for most of those certification applications. So it's really paramount that each year of service be clearly identified and captured on the appropriate form. And we tried to make our forms a little bit more user-friendly so it could help you determine what you need to fill out or need to provide with it. Now, of course, because of all of these exciting changes, as of September 1st, this means that non-public or asterisk certificates were no longer being issued. At the renewal of those non-public certificates, we're actually going to issue a standard certificate without the asterisk at the same level. For example, if they have a level 2 asterisk certificate and they meet renewal requirements, we're going to issue them a level 2 certificate if they don't already hold a standard level 2 certificate. When advancing these asterisk certificates, all new certificates will also be standard without the asterisk, regardless of the evaluations that were used. If you have an educator that currently holds a non-public certificate and they wish to be issued the certificate without the asterisk prior to the expiration of that certificate, if they meet renewal requirements, you can apply for those as soon as the required evaluations can be verified, even if it's more than 90 days from expiration of that certificate. So we talked about that experience verification form and how important it is, and that it's going to be it is a required part of most of the applications. A couple of things about it. We did change the format. It is now landscape format. All fields should be completed for each school year or role, and we do request that the date is month, and then 4-digit year. And then choose the employment setting that is required, the public or charter, which is one choice, non-public or a company setting. And you'll see that at the bottom of the screen where I have a snippet of the chart that I'm talking about here. One thing to keep in mind is that the experience should be verified and signed off by the current employer, in other words, whoever is submitting that application on behalf of the educator. And then the associated evaluation attestation form should be completed and signed off by a representative, usually HR, of whomever evaluated them for that given year. For example, if they were in a non-public for that year, you would send that local evaluation attestation form to their non-public for them to fill that out. Now, when an employee has been evaluated via Compass, there's no need to send the actual Compass evaluation documents to us. We verify that through our little window into the Compass Information System, or CIS. It should not be duplicatively reported on the local evaluation attestation form. We do see that a lot already. Please check Compass or have the educator check Compass before submitting the application. And again, as I mentioned on the previous slide, if there is, a complicated educator work history, you're not sure what they qualify for, submit a question, schedule office hours so we can discuss it. One other thing to note is that the employer evaluation should only be checked or selected for contracted teachers. And that's only for contracted teachers that are employed by BESE approved entities. Right now, we're still working on the approval process for those entities to be able to use those evaluations. So that really even shouldn't be checked just yet. It's not an option public schools should ever select for anybody that is directly employed by that school system. And again, we've seen some already where they're choosing that instead of the cannot be evaluated portion. Also note, cannot be evaluated is very different from was not evaluated. If they're in a teaching role, they should be evaluated via Compass. If they're in a leading role at the school level, they are required to be evaluated via Compass. So some examples that you might see where they have a complicated history is maybe they worked in EBR, but were previously employed by a diocesan school in Baton Rouge. EBR would verify that work history, but for the years that the educator served in the diocesan school, the Baton Rouge diocesan HR representative should complete that local attestation form. Another example would be if an educator is missing, they were serving as a teacher in your school, but they're missing an evaluation in Compass, you would not submit anything except for the verification form. We're going to see into our Compass window. If they don't have enough evaluations via Compass, then we are going to deny that application. So just make sure that you are checking Compass or having your educator check Compass before you submit the application. And remember, they only need 3 effective evaluations within their 5-year validity if they have a level 2 or a level 3 teaching certificate. On to the local evaluation attestation form. Again, this only can be used for teachers or leaders in the non-public setting, or it can be used only for leaders at the district level in the public school setting. Again, it should be completed by the representative of the evaluating entity, the public school HR for leaders or the non-public school HR for non-public teachers and leaders. That's who should be filling those out. It should include their role. For example, teacher, counselor, librarian, school level leader, district level leader, or other. If you choose other, please insert a job description so that we can determine with our Compass team what's appropriate for that role. Of course, include the scale. That's the highest possible score and the lowest possible score, then their earned score, what that effective or ineffective equivalent is, because your scale could be A, B, C, D, F. It could be 1, 2, 3, 4. It could be good, bad, ugly. We need to know what the highest and lowest scores are possible, what they earned, and which one is equivalent to effective or ineffective. And then, of course, you need to have the evaluator's name, email, title, and signature. And up to 3 years can be listed on this form. You'll need to use multiple forms if it is necessary. We do recommend that the last 5 years of service be verified, just so that it aligns with the certificate validity. All right, the employer verification form. It can only be used for educators contracted to BESI-approved entities providing instructional services only to public school students. That's how the legislation is worded. So that's how the policy is worded. And again, it has to be from a BESI-approved entity. We are working on the process for that and do hope to bring those, the policy and the process and maybe a few entities to BESI in the coming months. This form can only be completed by that BESI-approved entity. And again, it needs to include the same things, their role. Of course, you're choosing teacher, counselor, librarian, school level leader, district level leader, or other. And if you choose other, you'll have to insert the job description. Of course, include their scale, their earned score, the effective or ineffective equivalent, the evaluator's name, title, and signature, and up to 3 years can also be included on this form. Those 2 forms are very similar, but they're used for 2 very different situations. The temporary employment permit, or TEP, that now has 4 options. The first 2 options were expanded last year. That was, of course, that teacher preparation program provider option if they're lacking exams. And then, of course, we had the master's degree option if it was in a shortage area aligned to that master's degree. This year, there were 2 pathways added to that. The bachelor's degree candidate, and that is if they have a bachelor's degree in a secondary shortage area, that degree does have to be from an accredited institution and they must have a 2.5 GPA for that. They also have to pass the content exams that are in alignment with the degree and the classes that are being taught. And again, the bachelor's degree option is for a secondary shortage area only. So it can't be used for all areas. Then the other expansion for this year was the program completer expansion if they didn't have a program GPA of 2.5 once they were done. Of course, all TEPs have to be issued in a shortage area. The candidates do have to be mentored each year for renewal. They do have to have highly effective or effective proficient ratings to be able to renew as well. After 3 successful evaluations on that TEP, then mentoring is no longer required, but it is encouraged. They do have to stay on this certificate for 5 years and still continue to maintain those highly effective, proficient ratings for the 5 years on that TEP. After that, a candidate can be granted a level 1 teaching certificate if they're recommended by a school system for that. Something to note here is that the years on the TEP cannot count towards tenure. So keep that in mind when you're putting candidates on that. Any candidate that has not completed a teacher preparation program must also complete a pre-service training prior to that first day with their students. So that would be the bachelor's degree candidate option and the master's degree candidate option. Those two candidates do have to do that pre-service training class prior to their first day with students. So for the TEP application, we're looking at the application can be used for initial request of initial TEP and request for renewal TEP. And so this chart on this slide here does show you what types of documents you will need for these particular pathways. And again, for this slide in particular, it's for the issuance of an initial TEP. So you'll see the documents needed that are the same across all of them. Of course, their IDs, their application form, their professional conduct form. Also, official transcripts are something that is in common for all 4 pathways. Then you'll take a look at the 2 pathways that were not teacher preparation. Those 2 pathways do require that pre-service training attestation form, and then of course the payment confirmation form. The 2 pathways that do involve teacher preparation, they include a program completion verification form that will have to be completed by whichever in-state BESE approved program they completed teacher preparation with. We will need to see either the exam attempt section and score reports or exam score reports for either of those pathways, and then of course the payment confirmation. A couple of things to note is for recent completers, if they're completing recent programs since the 2016 program change, mentoring is a required part of program completion, so we will need to see that mentoring attestation form as well. TEPs have, with all the 4 pathways, it gets a little complicated, so we do ask that you use the guidance document to determine which forms you need to submit, which pathway is best for your candidate, but also it varies according to which pathway you're using as to what subject area the TEP can be in. So please reference that guidance document to determine those areas that can be requested for each TEP pathway. Remember that a TEP cannot be requested in a special education pathway. And not all pathways allow all areas. So even though the application will allow you to choose it because it's one application being used for all pathways, make sure that you're aligning it with the area that can be requested for that particular pathway. For the TEP renewal, we have a similar chart here that kind of shows you the appropriate documents to submit. In most instances, it'll be, of course, those IDs, the application, the professional conduct form, and then the mentoring attestation. And then we will be looking into our window of compass for us to be able to determine effectiveness, as that is a part of the renewal. Now, also as a part of the renewal for the preparation pathway for someone that's lacking those exams, they do have to attempt those missing exams at least twice since the issuance or renewal, the last issuance or renewal of that TEP. So we'll need to see that exam attempt verification form and those official score reports from those attempts. And again, remember, for renewal, we are looking for highly effective or effective proficient for all those renewals. And then what we'll do is we're actually going to issue another TEP. So it'll be like TEP 1, TEP 2, TEP 3. so on and so forth, similar to the way the TAT was many, many years ago. So for those of you that have been around for a little while, you may be familiar with that particular format of certificate issuance. All right, I will turn it over to my colleague, Paula Bell.
Hey, good morning. We're going to go on into the GPA Flex topic. This is back. So candidates not having a 2.2 undergraduate GPA at the time their degree was conferred can now be conditionally admitted into a BESI-approved teacher prep program. That conditional admittance requires that if the program awards credit hours, that the candidate has to obtain a 3.0 GPA by the end of the first 12 semester hours of that program. The candidate must also obtain a 2.5 cumulative GPA by the end or at the completion of the program. If a program does not award credit hours, it's a private provider, the applicant must demonstrate mastery of competencies as required by the program and the school system in which the clinical practice is completed. In either situation, before graduation or program completion, the candidate must also complete all program requirements as set forth by BESI, including requirements for the clinical practice or residency. So this is kind of different from the previous GPA flexibility policy in that the removal of the requirement for the structured interview. So that is no longer in lieu of that interview. Program providers can determine additional conditional admittance requirements if they so choose. However, your minimum entrance requirements as outlined in Bulletin 996, such as the requirement for passage of any associated content exams, they must have a non-education baccalaureate degree, etc. All those requirements still remain there. We can go to the next slide. So here we're talking about the practitioner's license application. Passing of the content exam, either electronically verified or an official school report, is required for admission into an alternative certification program. So the admission date cannot precede the passage of the content exam. Official transcripts, including the minimum of the undergraduate degree with a 2.2 cumulative GPA at the time the degree was awarded or conferred, is required with that PL packet. Of course, GPA Flex is permitted. Make sure no interview is required, but make sure that you are completing the document. There's a checkbox on the PL app, an attestation statement, and the initials of the teacher candidate are required there. There's no separate GPA Flex form, though, so we're trying to decrease the number of documents required, but still have an understanding of the program requirements under GPA Flex. You must also include that intent to employ. That's typically provided by the employing school system, and that the area of certification aligns with the program area. So good news also for the GPA Flex is that it's allowed for the issuance of a TAT. To align with the GPA Flex, options allowed for entry into a teacher prep program. So with the GPA Flex on the TAT, the teacher candidate must submit to a structured district interview for issuance of the TAT. And so we've provided a link here on this slide that will give you interview guidance as to what that structure should look like. And it's similar to what we previously used for the issuance of a PL. And those questions are designed to determine if the candidate's interest is in the teaching profession and perhaps the aptitude for developing mastery of Louisiana's general teaching competencies. So there's certain interview questions you may want to consider. Why do you want to be a teacher? What skills or experiences have you had that will contribute to you becoming an effective teacher? What do you expect that being a teacher candidate will require in terms of your time and commitment? And then you can pinpoint in with this interview into things about interest in teaching, grade level or subject area, those kind of things. So you would do that in your interview, structured interview, if you are going to use GPA Flex for the issuance of a TAT. So looking at the TAT application, a TAT is used to fill a teacher shortage area. And so that it must be in your teacher shortage areas in your school system. You're going to sign the application attesting to that. The person must have earned a bachelor's degree, GPA 2.2, or they can use that structured interview for the GPA Flex. Include the employer verification of that completed interview within the TAT application. Also, make sure that the application choices that you select from the drop-down menu on this packet, you need to make sure to select one. Is it going to be an initial TAT, a renewal of a TAT, or some type of change to an existing TAT in terms of school system? So check to see if the person has a TAT or has ever been issued a TAT. Sometimes folks have gotten TATs have requested TATs many years ago, and they've forgotten about them, or they may have, it may be some time since they've requested it. So just check on Teach Louisiana prior to submitting the TAT application to make sure that they've not previously held a TAT, or if they have, then it would be a renewal and that the person meets the renewal requirements for that application for that TAT. Moving on to educational leader, we have revised our leader application packet. We've tried to shorten it in our latest revision. So it still includes your basic documents needed and links to our checklists for each pathway. So the EDL checklists include the additional required documents specific to the selected pathway. There, of course, are 4 pathways. You have your master's, Alt Path 1, Alt Path 2, and Alt Path 3. When you click on those checklists within the Ed Leader packet, it will take you to the other required documents. Instead of us trying to lump all 4 pathway documentation into the packet, we've broken it out and linked to it so it wouldn't be as convoluted when they're trying to navigate this, since there are 4 different pathways. All of the pathways require that the individual successfully complete either the SLLA exam, that's that Praxis School Leaders Licensure exam, or they have to have completed the Louisiana Leadership Assessment Series, LLAS. That is a requirement for all 4 pathways. Finally, the professional conduct form has been revised and simplified. Instead of 5 questions, we've simplified it to 3. It is a required part of all certification application packets. It must be answered truthfully by the teacher or the applicant. If there are the top portion of the form is your demographic information, we need to make sure that that is accurate. Correct social, correct date of birth. We need that name as it appears on the certificate or social, and the address. If the applicant checks yes on any of the 3 questions, you must include some type of relevant or explanatory documentation that speaks to the yes answer. So the first question is regarding a censure of a professional license. Question 2 is regarding any possible investigation into a professional license being censured. And then question 3 is the big catch-all of, is there convictions? Not arrests, convictions. And so that would need to be addressed. We encourage the person completing the form, if they have a yes answer, they have to answer truthfully every time, but they don't need to send all the court documents. They can send, maybe they were approved through Bessie through a records review. They could just include that Bessie letter if that's the case. But something has to be with this form if a yes answer has been checked. I would caution you, do not send us the criminal background check. We are not, it's not allowed by law for you to share that directly with us. So the teacher or educator would need to find some other documentation to share with you to submit with that professional conduct form. All right, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague for the reinstatement of lifetime certificates.
Thank you, Paula. Good morning. So one of the changes in the last Bessie meeting was the reinstatement of lifetime certificates. So a lifetime certificate will lapse for disuse if the certification holder or the educator has allowed 5 consecutive calendar years to pass without being regularly employed as a teacher for at least 1 semester or 90 consecutive days. So in the past, when they reinstated it, it was reinstated and the educator was required to take 6 semester hours within that reinstatement period. But the change was made to allow the lapse certificate to, of course, be reactivated via request from the employing authority, but it will be previously reactivated at the attained level for a 5-year period. So during this 5-year reactivation period, the holder or the educator will be required to earn at least 3 effective evaluations within that 5-year period. And upon earning 3 effective evaluations, the holder through y'all will apply for the reinstatement back to its original lifetime validity. So again, semester hours of coursework are no longer required for reinstatement. Rather, it is going to be meeting the standards of effectiveness. The literacy add-on policy, this is just a snapshot of showing the vendors. Of course, Apple is equivalent to 3 credit hours, AIMS and Keys to Literacy are 6, and then Letters is 9. So in the alignment with the 2021 legislation, the literacy policy updates were approved regarding the science of reading competencies. So these competencies are required for all literacy coursework. Of course, teacher preparation providers do have some time to design and restructure teacher preparation literacy coursework, including for initial and add-on requirements. The changes for add-on literacy coursework, of course, include the requirement for the 9 semester hours of literacy for special education areas, and it'll become effective beginning the fall of 2024. So beginning with the 2024-2025 school year, program completers will be required to have the updated literacy foundations or the science of reading alignment coursework. So for initial preparation, right now it's semester or contact hours are only accepted for the literacy requirements. But however, for add-on, an educator may opt to use semester hours, contact hours, the adopted teaching of reading exam, or the literacy foundations training can be accepted for the number of hours per each program, which of course is what is listed in this table. So another update at Bessie last week was the approval of the new Teacher Certification Appeals Council member. We now have adopted LAP, which is Louisiana Association of Principals, as a named organization that will serve on the Teacher Certification Appeals Council. Last week, Bessie did approve the adoption of Mr. Hennessy Malasa, who will now serve beginning for the 2024 year moving forward. I believe on the next slide, we do have the 2024 meeting dates, but the last meeting for 2023 will actually occur next week on October 26th, which is next Thursday. And of course, like I said, this next slide, we do try to set the TSAC meeting dates in advance. So you'll see it's March 14th, June 13th, August 29th, and November 7th. Again, just a reminder to anybody that in order for an educator to be heard by the Teacher Certification Appeals Council, an educator must first apply through our office, be denied, and then we will provide relative guidance if that educator can or cannot appeal to the Certification Appeals Council. Within the newly revised TSAC application packet, we also have the dates set not only for the meeting, of course, but for the date deadline that an educator has to have everything submitted to our office, which generally is about 1 month prior to the actual meeting date. And then, of course, all certification packets are to be emailed to certificationappeal@la.gov. Please do not add them to our portal because we do not have a drop-down box. So there's no way for us to parse through the multitude of applications there. So please just send it to this designated appeal inbox, which of course is monitored daily, sometimes weekly by our office. So the next slide is the third-party entities application process. This actually refers back to the slide that I believe Christy had gone over earlier, which was the employer verification form. So all entities that are being contracted or contracting educators to serve Louisiana students will be required to go through a BESI approval process. We are in the initial kind of early steps of working and getting that policy approval process. So it will be going to BESI within the next couple of months. But of course, if you have any questions regarding this, you can always email Christy Ballou, our author Joe Freon directly, and they can provide any information relative to that process. But again, it is coming in the upcoming months, and guidance surrounding what that process approval will look like will be going out as soon as we know. So ancillary mentor and content teacher, several years ago when this process was initiated by our office, it was a standalone certificate that an educator held, and it kind of worked in tandem with an educator who held a standard certificate. So after hearing from the field and the educators, we decided that we would go ahead and put in a administrative request through our OTS department, to have any educator that held the standalone certificate to administratively add that on to their teaching certificate. That way that educator could just keep up with one certificate. It was added as an endorsement to that standard teaching certificate. So as long as that teaching certificate is valid, that endorsement will remain valid as well. So again, anybody who had that standalone certificate, we did receive word last Thursday, I believe, that anybody who had that, the endorsement was administratively added to that professional level certificate. But one thing to note, that the change did not apply to anyone who held that 1 year ancillary provisional, because that individual was in the process of completing requirements. And then of course, anybody who held just the standalone that worked in either in a non-public or was working uncertified in a charter school, those individuals, of course, did not hold a standard certificate to add, so that that certificate will remain intact as their standalone certificate. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to my colleague Lana, who will go over certification processing reminders.
Good morning, everybody. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Great. Some updates for OFET processing updates. We have, after getting some feedback from the field, we decided to slightly change the way that OFATs were issued. Previously, OFATs were valid for a single school session, and sometimes that would, an application received in January or February would be retroactively valid starting in July of the previous year, and that a little bit reduced the amount of actual time the teacher candidates had to complete the OFAT requirements. And so we've changed our processing as of July 1st of this year. We are now issuing OFATs valid for 1 full calendar year from the date that we actually issue the certificate. So they will get the full 3 years without it being backdated to the beginning of the school year. Best practice is to check teachlouisiana.net before submitting any request for an OFAT. Similar to the discussions about the TATs, the OFAT can be held for a maximum of 3 years for most areas. A couple of areas that require a little bit more coursework can have either 1 or 2 additional years. But an OFAT, a new OFAT cannot be issued if an older OFAT was held and that endorsement area was not added to the certificate. So if an educator previously held an OFAT in English, never added English to their certificate, they will not be able to be issued another OFAT in mild moderate until they add English to their teaching certificate as a full endorsement. So it's always best practice to take a look at their certification record and make sure they don't have any unfulfilled OFATs already before submitting a request. We also slightly updated TAT processing after discussions with the field about the usage of TATs. They are and have been for a little while issued for the year starting from the date it's issued. but we previously did not change the area on a TAT after the initial TAT had been issued. As this is a workforce shortage certificate, as we've had some conversations with our stakeholders, we've found a way that we can make that change at the time of renewal, because we do understand that your need area last year might be different than your need area this year. So if you'd like to make a change when renewing the TAT, you can select a different area than the area that was on the initial TAT, and we will change that area. But that can only be done at renewal extension. 3 years maximum is the total amount of time a person can serve on a TAT, regardless of the area, the LEA. Changing areas or changing school systems does not extend the amount of time they can serve on a TAT. Any year on any TAT counts towards the maximum allowed 3 years. The school policy, by this point, most of you are probably familiar with this. In January of this year, Bessie changed the school nurse policy to state that anyone who holds a Louisiana registered nurse license and is in good standing with the Louisiana State Board of Nursing is considered certified by Bessie. And that means that we no longer issue the ancillary school nurse certificates. We've provided some links here where you can verify with the Louisiana State Board of Nursing if an applicant holds a valid license in good standing. And if they do, they're considered certified by Bessie. So there's nothing that needs to be submitted to our office. And if you do submit an application, it'll be returned because we are no longer issuing those certificates. We encourage you to contact us and communicate with us, ask your questions. We're happy to provide any support, feedback, and guidance. We understand particularly with some of these recent changes in policy and law, there's going to be some learning curve for all of us as we go through figuring out how to fill out the new experience form and properly make the requests using the new application packet. So please feel free to reach out at any time. As Dr. Joe Freon included in his statistical analysis of our response times, we answer 94% of our questions within 5 business days. Anything that takes longer than that probably requires a good bit of research and communication with other departments for us to find the answer. But we generally answer most questions within 1 to 2 business days. Those questions that are submitted through the portal using Ask a Question then become part of your history on Teach LA Live, so you can refer back to them at any time. And it creates transparency and accountability for our office as well to be sure that we are all answering those questions in a timely manner. If a response is received that was unclear and needs clarifying, it can be routed to a more senior specialist or someone that specializes in that area. So it allows us to manage and make the workload and make sure that your questions are being answered by the most qualified person to provide that answer. We do ask that you provide specific details. We do regularly see questions that are very generic, where a lot of certification situations are going to be very specific to that individual, to their experience, their degrees, the type of certificate they hold. So anytime you're asking a question, it's always helpful to our office if you give us the educator's name, their certificate number, something that will allow us to look at their specific certification, the validity dates, the other information that we can see in our file, and provide you a more tailored answer that will specifically apply to that person. Sometimes it can be very critical for us to understand the type of certificate the person holds, when it expired, and some of their history in order to give you the very best and most accurate guidance for that particular educator. You also on Teach LA Live, if you have a complex question, if you feel like going back and forth via email might not be able to clearly communicate all the details that we would need to understand in order to provide guidance, you can also schedule office hours if you have an authenticated HR or program provider account. We can also use office hours time to expedite applications. If you have some that need to be taken care of for business reasons, hiring reasons, then you're welcome to schedule some time there. We do ask as part of the scheduling process that you submit a pre-question using Ask a Question that includes any case numbers you may want expedited or that you have questions about, any details about the questions. We try to make the most of your 15-minute interval. And one of the ways we can do that is by pre-working those cases, taking a look at what your questions are, doing any additional research we may need to do prior to the call. So when we're actually on the phone with you, we can directly address the issue and not have to spend your 15 minutes doing that additional research. So we can get some of that moving much more efficiently. Whenever you do submit those questions, you should always select the topic HR office hours to let us know that we should just route that to HR to be the pre-questions before your scheduled call. We are working with some additional resources to process applications. You may see certain application types processed out of date order. We're also doing some internal strategizing to make sure that we are maximizing the number of applications that we can get processed and to make sure that processing goes most efficiently. For instance, we are internally prioritizing the renewal hire packets as most other requests, your add-ons and endorsements, your OFATs, a lot of those things require a valid certificate. So if we prioritize the renewal hires, that helps us ensure that when the add-ons or the OFATs are being processed, the certificate has already been renewed or a hire certificate issued. We're also processing the early childhood ancillaries, the temporary authorities to teach, mentor teacher, residents, practitioner licenses, and initial certification for Louisiana graduates. We're all giving all of those some priority attention as well. The teaching authorizations, as you probably know by now, are no longer being issued. So that's another relief for us, one less application type to practice, but for us to process, but also be sure you're not spending time filling out those applications because they will just be returned. One of the things that we're doing additionally to help things process more efficiently is using an automated process that checks for some very basic information on the application packets. When it's run through the automated process, the case owner will show with FLR as the first 3 letters, which stands for first line review. We've gotten a few questions about what does that mean. That's all that is. It just means it's been through the automated tool and the automated tool made a determination. All applications are still reviewed by an actual person to make sure that what the automated tool found was correct. And if it did find anything that needs to be a response provided via email, we'll do that. We will make sure they get assigned to a specialist for processing after they've gone through that process, the first line review process as well. So don't be alarmed if you see those FLR. Any cases we have discussed with some of y'all that do use your history for adding files or making changes, or when you realize you have forgotten something. We've always stressed that that file should only be added or changed on a file that is unassigned. FLR can also be considered unassigned, but anything that's assigned to a person or pending or otherwise in process, changes should not be made once it gets past that initial unassigned stage. A recent analysis of our applications has found that about 30% of what we receive is incomplete, inaccurate, incorrectly submitted. And all of these issues create more work for you and more work for us. Anytime an application is incomplete, inaccurate, or incorrectly submitted, we have to review it, respond to it. When we tell you it's incorrect, that requires you to make those corrections and resubmit them. And it can delay processing for everyone and delay certification for the educators. So we do ask for your partnership in reviewing all of the applications, and we'll have a few best practices of things to be looking for when you're reviewing those applications to make sure that they are complete and correct. So the first thing that I would stress is to read and follow all instructions in each application packet. Even for those of you that have been doing this for a long time, those new application packets that were updated for October 1st have a lot more instructions in them in some cases. They are chock full of hyperlinks to other resources that can be used to make sure that the request is properly made. There are links to the Compass information systems, links to the sites that can be used to verify if a degree is accredited, if it could be accepted, links to check the current certificates on Teach Louisiana to make sure that you're requesting renewal or hire appropriately. There's links to that literacy resource. There's links to all sorts of other documents that can help you figure out if a request is being made appropriately. So be sure you read through those again. A few things have changed as far as what we're requiring as well. So if you're assuming you already know how to do it and not double checking the instructions on those new packets, there may be some additional delays. We also ask that you do not include parts of other applications with one application. A common example we see is a renewal hire request that has also the add-on EV form included both on the same case. We cannot process them both at the same time. So those, if requests are made on two separate applications, they should be submitted as two separate application submissions, each with the appropriate supporting documents and separate payment confirmations. We do encourage you to complete all documents and applications electronically as much as possible and just submit the original PDF file completed with the data saved in it. But if you do prefer to print or scan for different reasons, and we know sometimes even when the educator provides it to you, it's no longer editable. So there have to be some printing options or other things occasionally used. We do ask that you scan upright in the order of the application checklist and combine all those documents into a single PDF file. Remember that some of our new application forms, in order to give us more space to gather the information we need, those are now legal size paper. So if you are printing and scanning, you need to ensure that your printer and your scanner can handle legal size paper, and that with the resulting documents, you'll want to look at it and make sure you're not cutting off critical information on that scan. That's another common thing that we see with a lot of these legal size forms is they get scanned on letter size scanning and we're missing a third of the page. And so we can't use that to process. So be sure you're double checking your scan results if you do choose to scan and make sure everything is included, legible, and then submit a single PDF file whenever possible. We do know some files are security locked, so they can't be combined with others, transcripts, practice scores, and that's fine to have multiple attachments when you do have security locked documents included as well. Also, be sure when you're submitting that you're submitting the correct application type from that little drop-down list. As I mentioned a few slides ago, we are prioritizing certain types of applications, but that happens based on the application type that you selected. A common thing that we see is people submitting just a regular level 1, 2, 3 renewal hire status change. People will select EDL renewal hire. I guess they see the renewal hire, overlook that it says specifically educational leader, and so they'll choose that category. But when you do that, that renewal hire is not going to be prioritized because EDL is not currently in that bucket that we're focusing on. We are processing those in the order received and in a timely manner, but they aren't getting that extra week or two of advanced processing time. So be sure you're choosing that right category. We also use those to distribute the workload between the folks that we have on the team that have been trained in certain types of applications versus others. And when that's incorrect, an application might land with somebody who doesn't know how to work with it. So be careful with those. And then ensure that when you submit questions, that's submitted as a question using Ask a Question. And application documents should never be attached to question cases. Those should always be Submit Certification Application. We also encourage you when you're submitting an application to not ask questions about it on that notes section. You can include some notes, but if you have a question, you should ask that first and get an answer before you submit, because we don't see those questions that are attached to the application until the application is up for processing. And at that point, we have to process the application. But we can give you an answer if you ask first, and then you can submit appropriately. When submitting self-evaluations for add-ons and OFATs and ancillary teaching specifically, because those are the ones that primarily include coursework requirements, be sure that the educators, when they're filling out the self-evaluation, are including the course title and course number on that self-evaluation. This helps us to make sure we don't overlook something that the educator thinks will fulfill that requirement. We're going to check everything that's listed on every transcript we have, but this does help us make sure that something doesn't get overlooked. It also helps the educator make sure they know that they have fulfilled all requirements, or at least think they have. So if they can't find something that fulfills a particular requirement, they shouldn't submit the application unless they just want an evaluation and confirmation from us that the things they have completed have been completed, and showing them what's left to still be done. When submitting ancillary service primarily, but any other type of application request that requires a valid license, be sure you're checking the validity dates on that license before you submit it. The license has to be valid at the time of application processing. Our backlog is much better now, but it will still take 2 or 3 weeks for an application to get processed, maybe a month. So if it's getting really close to expiration, we should get a copy of a renewed license before submitting that application. If it is expired when the application is processed, then we do have to request a valid copy. One of the more complicated, confusing things that we see a lot is the qualifying degree requirements. When a graduate degree is a qualifying requirement for the issuance of a certificate or an endorsement, the degree, if official transcripts are included, will be placed on the certificate because it's required to issue the level 3, the EDL, the add-on endorsement that requires a graduate degree. So there's no need for an additional application, an additional fee to be paid to add the degree if it is a qualifying requirement. Now, if it's a qualifying requirement, but they don't otherwise qualify, so you've requested a level 3, you've requested a higher certificate, included a graduate transcript, but they don't have 5 years of experience, or they don't have 3 effective evaluations. We do not add the degree if they don't qualify for that higher certificate. Similarly with EDL or with an add-on endorsement. But if they qualify, and if you've double checked that the experience is verified and the evaluations are encompassed, then we'll just add the degree when we issue the level 3, because that has to be there to have a level 3. So we do recommend, in most cases, best practice is to submit the transcript with the related request and let that get processed. And then we'll let you know if they will need to submit a separate application to add the degree because they don't qualify. And then eligibility letters, when you do have an eligibility for OS, out-of-state, or EDL, educational leader, if you have one of those letters and you're submitting the request to issue the certificate, please be sure you're including the ID and social security card with that letter, as well as an updated professional conduct form.
Thank you. Questions to see if there were any questions that anyone had. Rachel, Paula, were there any questions in the chat that you saw? I know we're a few minutes over.
No, and I posted the slide deck again to the chat for those who joined a little bit later.
Of course, it will also be posted on Teach and on Louisiana Believes, or the monthly call section for certification. If you have any questions, please feel free to type in the chat or unmute yourself. We'll be happy to answer those. All right, I don't see anything in the chat. I will go ahead and move on to the summary and important dates. Just as some reminders, of course, we have our resources at the bottom. or the support calendar, resource guide, certification bulletin. One thing to note, the current bulletin that is posted, the August 23 version of the bulletin that is posted on the Bessie website, is not the most complete updated version. And that is all handled by Bessie, and that is part of the rulemaking and notice of intent process. So that is the version that came off of notice of intent as of August. There was a version that was adopted, emergency rule, at August Bessie this year. And so that has not been completely formatted and posted publicly yet. However, you can find the changes only can be found in the rulemaking docket available on the Bessie website. If you just go to the rulemaking docket and do a Control F for Bulletin 746, you'll find any related changes from the August Bessie meeting. And again, it's going to be that strike through and underline version. It's not going to have the entire bulletin, so you'll kind of have to fill it in with what else is posted out there. As soon as that version comes off of notice of intent, it will be posted on the Bessie website. The tricky part is it is effective now, emergency rule. And so that's what we are operating out of. The other key dates here that I do have listed are, of course, the October Early Childhood Care and Education Commission Task Force that meets today. On the 19th is the Advisory Council on Student Behavior and Discipline. Louisiana Literacy Advisory Commission is the 23rd. Of course, our Teacher Certification Appeals Council meeting is next Thursday. And then, of course, you have Superintendent's Council November 16th, and our monthly call is November 20th. Looks like we have a question. I want to confirm that the Literacy Foundation certificates cannot be used for a level 1 licensure. That is correct. So you're talking about the Literacy Foundation professional development, I'm assuming? Yes, that cannot be used for initial certification. The teacher preparation program provider does have to create or have to prepare the candidate for the literacy coursework. It can, however, be used for add-on purposes going forward, but not for initial. All right, the next section is just reminders in our appendix for the past legislative updates and such. Feel free to go through those slides. They have some of the past items that we've talked through. If no one else has any other questions, we will say goodbye and have a good day. Thanks for joining us today. Y'all have a good afternoon.